Texans. And
Oh
I think
yes.
it's who's going to replace Hopkins. It's a pretty simple question. Brandon Cooks, 5 concussions in the last 6 seasons. Randall Cobb, 30 years old. Will Fuller missed 20 games in the past 3 seasons. I mean, who's going to replace the production? I understand that you're getting in David Johnson. They're going to run him a lot. And I honestly, I'm kind of high on David Johnson fantasy wise, not football wise in a way, because I think they're going to feed the man a lot. But it's going to be interesting. And is Bill O'Brien, like, how much longer does he have to keep on messing around with the Texans and messing around with their hopes? But
well, your question falls right into mine, so I'll just put mine out there and we can talk about it kind of combined. Originally, my question was going to be about Brandon Cooks, but after talking to Nicholas Severini, another guy who is on the U92 radio staff, we broadened it out to just the bigger question, which is, can Bill O'Brien justify this offseason? Because he has been wheeling and dealing, and every single time he has, it is garnered tons of criticism, from me included. I was astounded at the DeAndre Hopkins trade, and it makes you wonder exactly what on earth is this guy doing. But can he prove that his moves as a general manager can be justified on the field? And the biggest one for me in that regard is the Brandon Cooks acquisition, because he got rid of DeAndre Hopkins. And going back to what I said earlier about the Bills, and we kind of talked about a little bit about the Texans earlier, is that having a top-notch number one receiver, or just having a number one receiver that acquires separate game planning for, is so critical to a wide receiving core. And it makes every other wide receiver twice as good and makes them look so much better when they have to double man the number one guy, or they have to figure out specific zone coverages to make sure this guy doesn't start, eating up yards and making play after play. Can Brandon Cooks be that? I don't think so. I don't think Brandon Cooks has that capability, but he might be able to do so. We'll see with Deshaun Watson throwing the ball to him, who is a phenomenal quarterback. I just don't see it out of him. And if he can, though, then Will Fuller, Randall Cobb, Fells, they're all going to look really good, especially with then Duke Johnson and David Johnson out of the backfield, who are going to be catching a lot of passes as well, both being very similar in design as running backs, just David Johnson having the more successful career. But in the end, can these moves that Bill O'Brien make, are they going to be justified on the field this season? I'm a doubter, but I could be proven wrong. I mean, I have before.
I mean, even if the production's good, can you still justify what he got back for Hopkins? I mean, Diggs,
I don't know.
Theoretically, really got more from my perspective. And I think Hopkins is better than Diggs. So even if they have a great season, like, can it still be justified? I mean, I think we'll forget about it and be like, okay, like, you knew what he was doing. But I mean, I think it's going to be hard to look back and be like, that's what you got for Hopkins.
Well, I guess the biggest thing is how David Johnson does, because that's the main difference between the Diggs trade outside of the first round picks and the Hopkins trade, is that they acquired a guy who has been really good in the past. Can he obtain that level of play again? Which, again, I doubt that David Johnson can reach that level again, whether you like him in fantasy or not. I don't know if he could do it. Maybe he can. I have my doubts. We'll see if it works out, but that's probably the indicator right there of if that Hopkins trade was worth it, because, geez, did it look like a terrible decision at the time it happened.
And also, like, how does he do in Arizona? Like, if he has a great season, it's going to look bad, or if he has a bad season, then it'll look okay. So it's going to be dependent on if we believe in Cliff Kingsbury or not. But we can move on to another team that I feel like people are like, do we believe in them or not? And that's the Titans.
Yeah.
And my question is, like, was last year real? Was this just a random flash in the pan, or is this going to be something that's legit? I mean, the Titans are returning 10 of their 11 starters on the offense from last year. And I mean, a lot of people are expecting Tannehill and Henry to regress to some degree. I mean, it is expected. They had great seasons. Tannehill became the second player in NFL history, which Joe Montana was the first to complete over 70% of his passes, an average of over 9 yards per attempt. And that's just going to be hard to do again. And then obviously Henry had over 409 touches. So the production and how much they were doing it at is going to be hard, and it's going to be hard to see. And I like the Titans, and I like Mike Vrabel and stuff like that, but it's like, can they run it back? Can it happen again? And I'm a little skeptical. I think they'll make the playoffs, but I'm not sure if they're going to be as great as they were last year.
I think, and it's a big thing to not overlook, is can the defense replicate what they did in the playoffs last year? Because that defense stepped up. Because, I mean, you can look at what Tannehill and what Derrick Henry did all day long, but that defense was asked a lot of them in all three of those playoff games. You had them going up against Tom Brady and the Patriots over and over and over again. The amount of drives in that game was insane. There wasn't a lot of scoring. There wasn't a lot of long drives. They were being asked to make stop after stop. And then in the second game, you had to stop Lamar Jackson. And that was also a tall order that they did over and over and over again. They let them creep back later in the game. But at that point, you already had so much of a lead on offense because the offense was clicking that you had some leeway. And then in the third game, you held the Chiefs for a little while. But Patrick Mahomes eventually did what Patrick Mahomes does, and you lost track of it. Can the defense do that again, not just for a playoff run, but for an entire season? I was very impressed with how they did. But my question is, back on the offensive side, though, I just wanted to piggyback off of what you were saying. And it's the question, can Tannehill do it when Henry isn't rampant? Because Ryan Tannehill found a lot of success last year, and it's partially because the box was loaded to the brim trying to stop Derrick Henry, who was running like a wild bull at the end of the year, where he just couldn't be stopped. People just literally could not bring him down no matter how hard they tried. And Ken Tannehill, who was running a lot of play actions, he had a lot of pretty simple reads to make, and he did it well. Credit to him. I enjoyed watching Tannehill last year. But when Henry, who has always been a streaky running back of sorts, he always has like a stretch of games where he does really well, and then he's kind of quiet for the rest of the season. Can Tannehill win games when that is the case, when Henry is not in, Super Saiyan mode, and can Tannehill, when the box not loaded, make some tough throws, make some big plays? Because that was always a question of him in Miami, if he can do that. And he sometimes showed he could, and other times he failed miserably. And I'll be curious to watch how he can do, especially now after making some big money this offseason.
So I guess, like, if you had to bet money on who could repeat their season, Henry or Tannehill, it seems like you're leaning towards, you believe Henry could do as well as last season. But
I'm skeptical of both. I'm skeptical of both doing as well. But I think Tannehill is more reliant on Henry doing well than Henry is reliant on Tannehill doing well. I think Henry, if he's going to go off, he's going to go off no matter what's going on around him. Whereas Tannehill, I think I struggle to see him having as much success as he did last season if Henry is not in great form.
Completely agree. So moving on to your favorite team, the Colts.
That's right.
And I know we mentioned them earlier in this pod, and I just had a joke question down, was who unexpectedly retires 2 weeks before the season.
We're coming up on it.
we're really close to it. So, there's questions, but I thought I would just let you take it away. Obviously, I think maybe the QB would be the biggest question. Does Phillips still have it?
I
but
think
since you're a Colts fan, you might as well take the floor here.
I've tried really hard for the most part to not just ask how will the QB do. There's a lot of AFC teams that the QB is in question. Josh Allen, Ben Roethlisberger, Joe Burrow, Baker Mayfield, Phillip Rivers. So I tried to avoid it, but this one still kind of has to do with Phillip Rivers. And it's the question, how much will be asked of Phillip Rivers? Because this Colts team has several good running backs on it and has one of the best run blocking offensive lines in the league. And you got so just to list names, you got Marlon Mack, who has been getting reps these past few years, does struggle to play all 16 games though. You've got Nyheim Hines, who is kind of like a project Darren Sproles of sorts. So I expect him to see some growth this year with Phillip Rivers. And then you've got now Jonathan Taylor, who I am just ecstatic about having. I'm so excited to have him on this team.
I love Taylor.
How he does.
So, he went to Wisconsin. My dad went there. So I loved him in college, and I hope he does well at the Colts.
So that's three guys who are really good. And then there's Jordan Wilkins. Why am I drawing a blank on his name? I'm going to have to look at this. I'm ashamed of myself as a Colts fan. Jordan Wilkins is his name. I just remembered. Jordan Wilkins, is also there, who had great yards per carry last season when, you know, he got thrown every now and then and did well when his name was called. So you got 4 guys who can take the ball, and you have a great running line to run behind. And today, actually, I was reading a tweet. The Colts are kind of doing a sort of makeshift game day simulation. And one of the reporters said, I think the Colts might break the record this year for most passes to running backs. So these guys are going to have their hands on the ball a lot, which then leads to me thinking, everyone's talking about how Phillip Rivers threw 20 interceptions last year and how he airs it out all the time. But how much is actually going to be expected of him? Because this running game is going to dominate this offense. It's going to be a run-first offense, which I think bodes really well for Phillip Rivers, given he's in the latter years of his career, that he does not have to throw for 400 yards to win a game. He can rely on the run game and then run play action, find T.Y. Hilton, hopefully find Paris Campbell and other guys and make it work.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Colts, obviously last year there was high hopes going into the season, and this year I have probably close to as high hopes. I know it's going to be a different looking team, and I agree with you. I don't think they're going to have to rely on Phillip Rivers that much.
Mm-hmm.
And because he is a gambler sometimes, but a lot of times he's, you know, their Chargers, I feel like, play behind a lot. I mean, I don't have a stat in front of me or anything, but at least watching the games, I always feel like Phillip's having to chuck up, you know, bad passes just because he's trying to come back.
Right,
And
right.
I don't think he's going to have to do that with you guys. I feel like you guys can control the tempo of the game just itself, and by run the ball. I mean, you do have three great running backs back there.
Yeah,
So.
yeah, I agree. I very much agree.
But the Jaguars,
Oh boy,
which is, you know, oh boy, does describe it a lot. And I think mine's more of just a question about their franchise, their management in a way. And does anyone want to be there is my question.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Jacksonville doesn't have any other professional teams, so that could go one of two ways. There's just people not like Jacksonville. But also, you could also think of it in the facet that Jacksonville only has the Jaguars. It's kind of like the West Virginia effect. Everyone loves the Mountaineers in West Virginia because they don't have any pro teams. And West Virginia is the only Power 5 college team. I would think that maybe if you're at Jacksonville, you really are attached to the Jaguars and you have a strong support. But it does seem like not a lot of people want to be a part of that organization.
Yeah,
So,
and like players constantly are asking out. I mean, there's one length article, pretty long one. It was just quotes about like execs and like reporters and stuff. But it was like, basically they're just so young. They have no veteran players. It's like over and over again. It's like they're young, they're building with youth. And 30 players on the 90-man roster, which I know it's a little bit slimmer than that now, are rookies. And then it's about 75% have been in the league 4 seasons or less. So it's a young squad and like just not a lot of veteran leadership. And, you know, they've had to ship people away. I know Leonard Fournette's asked, you know, to be traded, and he's kind of taken the decline. But that it's just like an organizational question, like what are they going to do? And I see Trevor Lawrence going there, honestly. Would be.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned how young they are. They are probably the youngest team in the NFL. And I read this stat earlier. More than 70% of the Jaguars roster is 25 or younger, which is absurd. That is a lot of young guys on the team.
Yeah.
Which brings me to my question. This team's going to be terrible. This team is not going to be good. They might be the worst team in the NFL. I'd argue the Jets are also in that conversation, might be the worst team in the NFL, unless Sam Darnold can really just carry that team out of that. I think the Jaguars are the worst team in the NFL, though. So my question is, where will we see growth this year? Because it's such a young team. You're going to see some improvements. We might see very similar to how the Miami Dolphins were last year, where they looked abysmal at the beginning of the year. And by the end of the year, they kept the Patriots from getting a first-round bye and had they had strung a couple of wins together. Maybe we see that from Jacksonville this year because of how young they are. I like DJ Chark. I don't know if I'm sold on Minshew Magic or Minshew Mania or whatever they're calling it down in Jacksonville as a long-term solution, but I'd be curious to see how he grows this year. And they're in a division where every single team is not exactly a stalwart powerhouse contender right now. Like the next division we're going to talk about, where it's going to be is rough. Yeah. But I'll be curious to see which players come into their own. They have some promising pieces on defense. You got Josh Allen, you got Chase on now. I'm curious to see how, or not how, but who steps up, who becomes the next players on this team, because they are a far cry from that Saxonville team just a few years ago.
Yeah, which I know a lot of people are showing. A lot of people, when I was reading, I'm showing correlation between the Titans and Jacksonville. Be like, well, if you see Jacksonville, they made that run and then they're done. It's like, well, the Titans, will the same thing happen? Which I don't think it will. I think Titans have a better structure in place. At least I hope.
Yeah.